So it's possibly mission accomplished from Games Workshop, but they're certainly not making people very happy with them. It seems that fairly predictably, if you wanted to pick up the new Chaos Battleforce box set, the odds were stacked fairly heavily against you. Hello and welcome back to Warspecs Tactics, where today I thought we'd take a quick look at the Chaos Space Marine release. As expected, not the best news for many people if they actually wanted to get their hands on one of the big box sets, though I thought it would be interesting to see exactly what happens and what people's experiences were when trying to pick it up. As we've been talking about a bit over the week with all the Chaos Space Marine news and rules coming out, it's been their launch of their codex this weekend, everything going up for pre-order, the codex, 2 battle forces and a combat patrol, really quite a big and important release by normal Games Workshop standards. Chaos Space Marines are one of 40k's biggest and most followed factions. The boxes that a lot of people had their eye on, at least from surveys that I did earlier, were a couple of big discount Battleforce box sets, the Veterans of the Long War and the Dread Talons, the Veterans a bit more core Chaos units, the Dread Talons the Cultist and Raptor themed ones, each packaged with a new Chaos Lord that will be releasing separately later. These were basically guaranteed to be in pretty big demand, given that they're better discounts than normal, and had a few things in them that hadn't seen sort of regular discounts previously that much. Early indications of this really weren't looking that good. Plenty of third-party retailers were reporting ahead of time that they hadn't been given very much, which is never normally a good sign, but often Games Workshop's web store supplies are a bit better. This time though it really seemed not to be the case. I can certainly attest that from the UK it's pretty much a case of them appearing at 10 and then being pretty much gone instantly after that. Certainly seemed like they were available for around about 2 minutes or so or less if you actually tried to add them to your cart and buy. At least anecdotally it seems to be kind of similar for other regions around the world. In the USA it sounded like a fairly similar story in terms of how fast they went. Europe I believe operates from the same distribution as the UK, so it shouldn't have been different there. It does still look like the Dread Talon set is still available in Australia. I have noticed a few things selling out a little bit slower in Australia and New Zealand versus the rest of the world, though maybe that has something to do with the big markup they pay versus the rest of the world, maybe pushing down demand a bit. At least in the UK I didn't see any obvious evidence of a queuing system this time round. I don't know if that had some sort of effect on allowing more people to scalp the box set or not, but in general it does just seem that there are very few going around in the first place. For the discount retailers, even before the official release went out, there was quite a lot of reports of them getting somewhere like 2 to 5 of each battle force, often 2, despite clearly wanting many more for a kit that they could probably sell 50 plus of. As a result, plenty of stores just chose not to list them at all, or to list them and just mark them as unavailable. I guess it's kind of awkward when you just have literally 2 box sets to go around, and you've probably got dozens or more of people who want to pick them up if possible. As with quite a few of these extremely limited releases, they often just tend to not bother being discount retailers for that and put them up at Games Workshop's full price. I guess they have lower incentive to if they know they're absolutely going to sell out regardless. For the most part, most of those sold out pretty much instantly. Games Workshop does tend to be kind of stingy with the allocation of these ones, but judging by the web store, it's not like Games Workshop themselves seem to be hoarding loads of them for them either. Finally, I was wondering if there were just going to be masses and masses of these posted on eBay, and while it does look like there were a few, it doesn't really look like they're actually being scalped in the same sort of numbers as, say, Lionel Johnson was, or that End and Death Volume 2 book. I guess there might be some scalpers out there who only bother to actually list the boxes when they actually receive them, but at least in the past people have generally tended to pounce on it and put up their listings as soon as they successfully pre-order them, and that just doesn't really seem to have happened in the same sort of numbers, at least as best I can search. Between all that, it just really sounds like Games Workshop haven't made enough of these, and basically every part where they possibly could be sold, there's fewer than you might expect. I did wonder with that in mind how many people might have managed to pick them up who wanted them, and how many people missed out. In a channel poll discounting all the people who had no interest in picking up these boxes in the first place, this was how it broke down. A bit over 1,000 people were relevant for people who tried to pick this up. Apparently around about 24% actually managed to successfully land the box or boxes that they want. A pretty tiny number there, given how many sales Games Workshop could have landed out of this. Seems that about 75% of people left disappointed. Out of the 2 box sets, it seemed that people had more trouble picking up the Veterans of the Long War. That seemed to sell out faster than the other one in most places that I saw. I guess that fits with what happened on the Australian web store, where that still seems to be up at time of recording, at least as best I can tell from the UK. From the polling of what people were looking to pick up earlier in the week, it was the more popular one, though maybe not by enormously crazy amounts. I guess it does stand to reason as maybe the more core and central Chaos kit perhaps particularly desired by anyone who wanted to jump into the faction, maybe build as a bit more of a core of the army versus perhaps the slightly more expansion-esque set that was the Dread Talons. Obviously all of this isn't exactly a new trend, though I do find it interesting enough to keep tabs on with the new releases. Games Workshop's long been accused of slightly FOMO marketing, basically constantly advertising cool shiny things at you like these Battle Forces or limited edition box sets, and then basically having enough of them sell out instantly that you never really quite secure that any one box set might be available for you to just simply buy when it goes live. Games Workshop perhaps being it a bit of a incentive to underproduce to basically guarantee anything that they make sells out, even if it does mean that lots of customers are annoyed with them. From their point of view, they will genuinely want to try and produce as many as possible as will actually sell, as they certainly do want the sales. But on the other hand, they really don't want to overshoot, as if they produce far more boxes than people actually buy, then they're making waste for themselves, and it often seems to result in them undershooting the mark a bit, perhaps even more incentivized to do so a little bit, because if they generally tend to underproduce just a little bit, every time box sets like this go live, they generate lots of interest and lots of people trying to pick them up before they're all gone, perhaps leading to people jumping on future releases with even greater gusto. Admittedly, throughout 10th edition this hasn't happened with every box set. It did turn out there seemed to be broadly enough Leviathan box sets to go around if you wanted one, and other sets do seem to have been overproduced if anything, say the Kroot launch set, and it seems that despite initially selling out the Auric Champions, still is available in plenty of places. That's the Custodes Battleforce. Element Games does still have some of those. And for a quick Google, it looks like I can see some still available in discount retailers in the USA too. A bit less familiar with you folks across the pond though. On the other hand though, the Deathwing Assault and the Stomper Boys Orcs box set generally went very fast indeed, at least off the web store. People didn't have much chance to get them. More so with things like the Kill Team box sets, Kill Team Nightmare and Salvation went pretty much instantly. In a fairly similar sort of case of affairs to this Chaos launch, it isn't literally every release that sells out instantaneously, but it's enough of those to be a bit depressing really. If you weren't able to pick up some of these battle forces that you want to, obviously bear in mind alternatives to Games Workshop still exist, lots of third-party and 3D printed sculpts out there, and often tends to crop up in comment sections after that people aren't particularly happy to reward Games Workshop for these sort of bad practices and might be willing to embrace some other avenues. If you do prefer the plastic though, I generally advise not buying off the scalpers, and particularly for these kits. The only real incentive to these ones is the discount that they get you, which is going to be completely ruined if you're paying a complete markup for them. The Chaos Lord sculpts will come out individually in the not too distant future, and you might save yourself buying lots of other Chaos Space Marines if they were your primary interest. And otherwise for the rest of the stuff, just go through discount retailers for something like 15 to 20% off. That's going to completely offset any saving that you might have had from this thing if it's been marked up by people scalping the box set on eBay. Otherwise, bear in mind that online pre-orders aren't actually the end of the story. There's usually a wave of boxes appearing in physical Games Workshop stores, and they should be around on the 25th of May. Certainly not an option for everyone, but you might be able to get in touch with a local store manager to ask if they will have any stock, if it's possible to set any aside, and if it's worth the effort of travelling in to see if they've got any, which for some could be very little, but for others could be quite significant, and you don't want to go out of your way if you're not going to be actually rewarded with the thing that you're after. Otherwise, I don't know if it'll be the case this time, but sometimes third-party stores get restocks of these as well. I noticed Element Games had another wave of things like the Stomper Boys and the Deathwing Assault box set a while back. Might be worth keeping your eyes out just in case any local stores do get some restocks. It does seem to be a bit more of a theme in the UK versus the US and the Australia sort of stores, to my knowledge. As mentioned, it does still seem that they have some Auric Champions up for sale. That's linked down in the video description if you were looking to pick up some cheaper Custodes. Between all that, it's at least possible that the 75% disappointed figure might go down slightly at least. I'm sure there will be at least a fair allocation for people picking them up in physical stores on release day, but at the moment it's still not looking good. For a lot of people, it's just going to be a release that happened and they couldn't get because Games Workshop didn't pick up enough. For one final thought, I did mention this in a previous video before they went live, but perhaps not completely dismiss the Chaos Space Marine Combat Patrol that launched at the same time. In the context of the battle forces being so hard to pick up, the Combat Patrol is actually kind of interesting. I think the vast majority of people will have had the choice of either picking up the Battleforce box set at full price from Games Workshop, or picking up this Combat Patrol set for something like 15% off via a discount retailer. As ever, I do have the ones linked in the video description that help support the channel. Element Games in the UK has them for a big 20% off, Wargame Portal in the USA has them for 15% off. If you take into account that discount, it does kind of make up the difference between the Combat Patrol deal versus the Battleforce deal if you were going to be picking up the Battleforces at full price. Obviously, it does depend on exactly what models you did want, though. I feel like the Possessed and the Master of Possession are pretty awesome sculpts, and Legionaries and Cultists are just generally handy to have as the core of your army. I don't know if people might be a little bit put off this one though, given that Possessed and the Master both got some nerfs in the Codex. It was a bit sad to see Possessed losing their devastating wounds every turn and having that go once per game. Still probably something worth considering. At least for top line discount, this is kind of similar, given that there were so few places discounting the battle forces. All those damage mitigation type things aside though, I must admit it's not the best look for Games Workshop as per normal. As you can see, lots of disappointed people out there, with 3/4 of people let down by the lack of supply. I'll be interested to hear your guys' thoughts, feedbacks, and anecdotes of the release down in the comments below as always. Otherwise, if you'd like to hear more like this, I'll certainly keep on covering Games Workshop's news and releases, hopefully with more positive things in the future. Feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics if you'd like to keep up with their releases and rules news. Finally, if you have been enjoying all the videos on the channel, I would just like to mention that Auspex Tactics does have a Patreon page as well, and you can find that linked in the video description if you'd like to help support and keep all these coming. Channel patrons do get a fair few advantages, seeing certain videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things come next on the channel, and automatic entry into the regular prize giveaways with a chance to win some big model kits each month. If any of that sounds good to you, or you'd just like to help support, the link is down in the video description. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.